Good morning/afternoon, everyone. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt like your energy just dropped, like something invisible was pulling you down? There is a reason the calmest person in the room is often the most powerful. Self-mastery before confrontation isn't just a tactic. It's a mindset, a lifestyle, and a form of quiet strength that few understand until they've faced chaos and refused to become it. It's easy to yell, to react, to snap back. But smart people know the first person you must learn to lead is yourself. When someone crosses a line, pushes your buttons, or tries to provoke you, your first instinct might be to respond immediately, lash out, defend, prove a point. But let's be honest, what happens when emotion runs ahead of intention? We say things we regret, do things that cost us peace, and worst of all, we give toxic people the control they were looking for. That's exactly what they want. They don't want truth, they want reaction. Smart people pause, not because they're weak, but because they're calculating. They breathe through the tension, they study the space between the words. They look past the insult to see the insecurity driving it. They know that most confrontation isn't really about you. It's about what the other person hasn't dealt with inside themselves. And when you truly understand that, you stop personalizing poison. Self-mastery is about choosing not to mirror the chaos around you. You can be surrounded by dysfunction and still decide, this won't live in me. You can hear something outrageous and still say to yourself, I don't have to react to that. That kind of control isn't natural, it's trained. It's built through discipline, through knowing that not everything deserves your energy. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Some invitations are traps dressed up as conversations. There's something magnetic about the person who stays composed when everyone else is losing it. That kind of presence, it's earned. It's built through years of knowing that your reaction is your responsibility, always. And if someone can control how you feel, they can control what you say. They can manipulate your mood, your words, and eventually your decisions. Smart people don't let that happen. They protect their responses like a vault. They know their peace is currency, and they don't spend it on drama. Even when they do decide to confront someone, they do it with precision, not with emotion spilling out, but with clarity. Calm is not the absence of feeling, it's the presence of focus. When you master yourself, your words cut deeper not because they're louder, but because they're anchored in truth. There's no need to raise your voice when you're rooted in your values. What's even more powerful? Smart people don't just control their reactions, they understand their triggers, they do the work. They ask themselves the hard questions. Why did that bother me? What wound is this touching? Am I responding to the moment or my history? Self-awareness is part of self-mastery. It's not just about dealing with others. It's about facing yourself, because here's the real test of power. Can you remain kind in the face of cruelty? Can you keep your voice steady while someone else raises theirs? Can you step back and let silence do the heavy lifting? If you can, you're already ahead. You're already winning. Not every fight needs fists. Some battles are best won with composure. And sometimes the most strategic thing you can do is not react at all. Nothing confuses a toxic person more than someone who refuses to lose control. And don't get it twisted. Mastering yourself doesn't mean you tolerate bad behavior. It means you choose when and how to address it. On your terms, with power, not panic, with dignity, not desperation. There's a big difference between suppressing emotion and mastering it. The first leads to breakdowns, the second leads to breakthroughs. Think of it this way, every confrontation is a test, but it's not a test of how clever you are, how sharp your comeback is, or how fast you can clap back. It's a test of how deeply you know yourself. When the pressure rises, do you crack or stay solid? Do you lose yourself or lead yourself? Smart people, strong people, they don't just win the argument, they win the moment, and they do it by winning over themselves first. Would you like a version formatted for a presentation, audiobook, or video narration next? Boundaries are a power move, written in a professional, emotionally expressive, and engaging tone, without subheadings or conclusion. There's a quiet strength in saying no, not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of deep self-respect. Setting boundaries isn't about being cold or distant. It's about knowing your worth and protecting your energy. It's about recognizing that not everyone deserves access to you, and not every situation deserves your presence. Boundaries aren't barriers, they're bridges, to clarity, to confidence, to calm, and smart people use them without guilt. Some people hear the word boundary and assume conflict. They imagine walls, confrontation, discomfort. But in reality, a boundary is simply the line where one person ends and another begins. It's the point where you say, this is who I am, and this is what I will and will not allow in my life. And that's powerful. That's not selfish. It's sacred. Because if you don't set the terms of your life, someone else will. And often, they'll set them for their comfort, not your well-being. Smart people understand that setting boundaries isn't about controlling others. It's about taking control of yourself. It's choosing to respond to life instead of constantly reacting to it. It's knowing that you can be kind and firm at the same time. You can love someone and still say, this doesn't work for me. You can care deeply and still choose distance when closeness becomes unhealthy. That is not cruelty, that is wisdom. People who lack boundaries often find themselves overwhelmed, exhausted, resentful, and they don't always know why. But the truth is, if you say yes to everyone else, you're saying no to yourself over and over again. You become drained not just of energy, but of identity. Because each time you ignore your limits, you send a message to yourself that your peace is negotiable, that your needs come second, and eventually that eats away at your self-worth. Boundaries are a declaration. I matter too. They're the difference between connection and codependence, between compassion and burnout, between being used and being valued. And smart people know that if someone is upset by your boundary, it's usually because they were benefiting from you not having one. So don't be surprised when resistance shows up. It will, but that discomfort, it's part of the process. Growth always comes with growing pains. When you set a boundary, you are not being difficult. You are being deliberate. You're making a conscious decision about how you want to be treated, what you will tolerate, and what you need to stay healthy. Mentally, emotionally, even spiritually. And here's something powerful. The more you enforce your boundaries, the more you teach others how to respect them. People learn from what you allow, so show them clearly and consistently what the standard is. And no, you don't owe everyone an explanation. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to over-justify your limits to anyone, especially not to those who disrespect them. Smart people understand that their life isn't a group project. They don't outsource their comfort to please others. They don't hand over their peace to keep the illusion of harmony. They know the difference between pleasing and preserving. One empties you, the other protects you. Boundaries are also how you filter your relationships. They show you who is really there for you versus who's only there for what you can give them. When you stop overextending, the people who love the real you, not the version of you that's always available, always agreeable, always giving, will stay, and those who don't, let them go. They weren't choosing you, they were choosing what you do for them. One of the boldest things you can do in a world that rewards people pleasing is to simply honor yourself, to say, this is how much I'm willing to give, and stick to it, to not apologize for needing space, silence, or solitude, to not feel guilty for saying, I'm not okay with this. That's not weakness, that's alignment. That's how smart people operate, with self-awareness and self-respect. So the next time someone calls you too much, too distant, or too hard to reach, remember this, you're not to anything. You're simply no longer available for what drains you, and that decision, that boundary, that is your power move. Let me know if you'd like this piece adapted for speech delivery or visual presentation. Word expansion of the keynote, don't play their game, written in a powerful, emotionally engaging tone without subheadings or a conclusion. There's a certain kind of person who thrives on chaos. They poke, prod, and provoke, not because they want truth, but because they want a reaction. Their entire strategy is built on distraction, manipulation, and drama, and the smartest move you can make, don't play their game, don't take the bait, don't step into the ring they built just to watch you swing wildly while they smile from the sidelines. When you engage on their terms, you lose, even if you think you've won the argument. The truth is, some people don't want resolution, they want control. They want you flustered, defensive, off balance. And the moment you give in, raise your voice, explain yourself too much, or go back and forth, they win, because that emotional reaction, that's the currency they trade in. They want to see you unravel so they can say, look, you're the problem. That's the trap. That's the game, and smart people know how to walk away from a rigged table. It's not about being passive or pretending nothing's wrong. It's about choosing the battlefield. It's about protecting your energy from the black hole of someone else's dysfunction. Some people have turned drama into a sport. They bait you with subtle digs, guilt trips, or fake concern. They ask questions they don't want answers to. They twist your words, deny the obvious, or shift blame so fast you start questioning your own reality. And then they say, see, you're too sensitive. That's not a conversation. That's manipulation in disguise. Playing their game means you lower yourself. You meet them at a level where logic and empathy don't apply. And when you do that, you abandon your center. You hand over your emotional remote control. Why should someone else decide how you feel? Why should their chaos become your mood? Smart people guard that space like it's sacred. They know peace is earned, and they're not about to give it away to someone who doesn't even value their own. The power move is silence, distance, disengagement. Not every insult needs a reply. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to stay grounded, to refuse to be shaken. Let them throw their storm. You don't have to stand in the rain. When you stop responding, you stop feeding the cycle. You shift the dynamic. You take your power back, not by overpowering them, but by becoming unshakable. There's something deeply unsettling to a toxic person when their old tactics stop working, when the buttons they used to push don't trigger anything anymore. When the arguments don't start, when the guilt doesn't land, when you look them in the eye, calm and clear, and say, not this time. That's when the game falls apart, because the rules were always written to exhaust you. And now, you're rewriting them. Sometimes the hardest thing is to walk away from the urge to be understood, to prove your side, to correct the lie, but there's a point where you have to ask yourself, is this about truth or is this about control? If it's the latter, then your energy is better spent elsewhere. Smart people don't waste breath on closed minds. They save it for people who are capable of real dialogue, not emotional warfare. When you refuse to play their game, you force people to sit with themselves. That's uncomfortable for them, not you. They'll try harder at first. The manipulation may intensify, the volume may rise, but that's just noise. That's desperation disguised as dominance. Don't fall for it. Stay still, stay clear, respond when it serves you, and when it doesn't, walk. No grand speeches, no dramatic exits, just quiet, decisive detachment. You don't have to prove you're right to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You don't owe anyone your peace just because they demand your attention. The smartest people learn to rise above, not by ignoring problems, but by refusing to be pulled into battles that were never about solutions. Don't stoop to match dysfunction. Rise to protect your direction, because when you stop playing their game, you don't just win. You change the rules entirely. You remind them, and more importantly, you remind yourself, that your energy is not up for negotiation. Let me know if you'd like this version adapted into a script for stage, video, or voiceover. Silence can be louder than words, written in a powerful, expressive, and emotionally intelligent tone without subheadings or a conclusion. There's a moment in every conversation where silence says everything. It's not empty, it's not passive, it's intentional, strategic, powerful. Silence isn't the absence of response, it's a decision. And when used wisely, it echoes louder than any argument, any defense, any scream. Smart people understand that in the right hands, silence can be a tool of strength, clarity, and control. Not because they don't have something to say, but because they've already said enough. There's a myth that silence means surrender, that if you don't speak up, you're weak. But silence isn't weakness, it's restraint. It's standing so firm in yourself. Worth that you no longer feel the need to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't. Engage in every debate. You don't justify your decisions to someone who's only looking for an opening to twist your words. Silence becomes the shield between your peace and their chaos. Sometimes, the most commanding thing you can do is say nothing at all, not because you don't care, but because you care too much about your energy to waste it where it won't be respected. When someone's intention is to provoke you, disrupt you, throw you off center, they're waiting for a reaction, and when you meet them with silence instead, it confuses them. It exposes the hollowness of their approach. It shows that their chaos cannot penetrate your calm. Silence gives you space to think clearly. It buys you time. It separates reaction from response. It allows emotion to settle so wisdom can rise. Smart people know that not every situation demands a verbal answer. Sometimes silence is the answer. It says, I'm not available for this kind of energy. It says, you don't get to pull me into your storm. It says, I've outgrown this conversation. When someone tries to bait you, poking at your insecurities, testing your limits, pressing old wounds, they want you loud. They want to see the reaction, the frustration, the unraveling. But when you meet that tension with stillness, when your face stays soft and your mouth stays closed, it sends a different kind of message. One that says, I see what you're doing and I'm not playing. That's not avoidance, that's power in its quietest form. Silence also has a way of making people sit with themselves, and that is deeply uncomfortable for those who rely on noise to distract from their own issues. When you go quiet, the mirror gets clearer. People are forced to face the weight of their own words, their actions, their intentions, and without your voice filling the space, they have no one left to blame, just themselves and the truth they were trying to dodge. Sometimes silence is how you protect your dignity. Because once you've said what needs to be said, repeating yourself isn't communication, it's pleading. Smart people know the difference. They don't chase understanding where there's no willingness to listen. They don't beg to be heard. They speak once, clearly, and if that's not enough, they let their silence finish the conversation. You also start to realize that silence can teach you a lot about people, about patterns, about your own triggers. When you're not always rushing to fill the space with noise, you hear more. You observe more. You become more aware of what's real and what's manipulation. You catch the tone that contradicts the words. You see the behavior that repeats despite the apologies. And with that awareness, you choose differently. Silence is especially powerful when it follows disrespect. Not because you're ignoring it, but because you're choosing not to give it air. You're choosing not to elevate it. You're saying, you don't even deserve a reaction. And that's a line few people are prepared to cross. When someone realizes they no longer have access to your emotional response, it changes the entire dynamic. They're left with their own echo, and sometimes that's the loudest consequence of all. There will be moments where walking away without a word is the most powerful statement you'll ever make. No yelling, no grand declarations, just a quiet exit from what no longer serves you, and in that silence you find something priceless. Peace, not the kind that's given to you, but the kind you claim for yourself, over and over again, because in the end, silence isn't about being voiceless. It's about knowing when your voice is too valuable to be wasted. Let me know if you'd like this tailored for video, podcast narration, or public speech delivery. Learn to exit without drama, written in a composed, emotionally intelligent, and powerful tone, without subheadings or a conclusion. There's an art to leaving quietly. To walking away not because you were defeated, but because you were no longer interested in battling for what doesn't serve you. Smart people learn to exit without drama, not because they're cold, but because they've matured past the need for scenes, explanations, or emotional theatrics. When something is no longer aligned with your peace, your growth, or your values, the most powerful move you can make is to step away silently, confidently, and with your dignity intact. Not every ending needs to be loud. Not every goodbye has to come with doors slammed or voices raised. In fact, the calmest exits are often the strongest. They're not about punishing the other person or proving a point. They're about choosing self-respect over chaos, about recognizing when a situation has run its course and deciding, I'm done, not angry, just done. There's a strength in restraint, in not explaining yourself to someone who wouldn't understand anyway, in not demanding closure from someone who never gave you clarity in the first place. Walking away without drama means you no longer need permission to choose yourself. You no longer need to justify your boundaries. You don't crave validation for your pain. You simply know that your peace is non-negotiable, and anything that threatens it doesn't get to stay. Exiting with grace takes discipline. It means you've done the internal work. You've faced the part of yourself that once needed to be heard, to be right, to have the last word, and now you've outgrown that. You've realized that sometimes the best way to protect your energy is to withdraw it completely. No grand exit, no revenge, just silence and space, because what you walk away from says more about you than what you stay to fight. Leaving without drama also reveals the truth about those around you. When you no longer play into the cycles, when you don't react, when you don't entertain the same dysfunction, it forces others to face themselves. They can't blame you if you're not there. They can't manipulate scene you never step into. Your quiet exit becomes a mirror, and not everyone is ready for the reflection. Sometimes people push buttons just to keep you engaged. They want the argument, they want the scene, because as long as you're reacting, they still have power. But the moment you stop showing up for the performance, it ends. That's the part toxic people can't handle. Your stillness, your indifference, your calm, it dismantles the narrative, it starves the cycle, it shows them they no longer control the outcome. And sometimes it's not even about people. Sometimes it's places, jobs, environments. It's the courage to say, this no longer fits me, and walk away, not bitter, not broken, just ready for more. You don't have to wait for things to get worse. You don't need to hit rock bottom before you allow yourself to leave. Smart people recognize misalignment early, and instead of forcing themselves to stay, they exit without spectacle. They protect their evolution. You learn that peace isn't found in explosive endings or dramatic declarations. It's found in the quiet decision to no longer participate in what drains you. It's found in the silent understanding that closure isn't something others give you. It's something you choose for yourself, not because everything makes sense, but because you're ready to move forward even without all the answers. Exiting without drama doesn't make you heartless. It makes you wise. It means you've learned how to honor your feelings without letting them control your actions. It means you've learned to walk away with your integrity, even when your emotions beg for retaliation. That level of discipline is rare. That's why it's powerful, and yes, it might feel unfamiliar at first. Especially if you were taught that leaving means conflict, or that expressing your pain must come with volume. But over time, you'll feel the shift. You'll begin to trust the quiet. You'll recognize the freedom in not explaining yourself. You'll feel the strength in your silence, because walking away without drama doesn't mean you weren't hurt. It means you chose healing over chaos, and that is the kind of power that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. Let me know if you'd like this version transformed into a performance. Ready script or visual monologue. Control the narrative, written in a bold, emotionally intelligent, and commanding tone, without subheadings or a conclusion. The most powerful story being told about you should be the one you are telling. Not the twisted version shaped by someone else's agenda. Not the whisper that spreads behind your back. Not the assumptions made by people who never even asked for the truth. Control the narrative, not because you owe the world an explanation, but because your life, your reputation, and your energy are far too valuable to leave in the hands of someone who doesn't see the full picture. People will always try to define you. They'll take a single moment, a mistake, a rumor, and build an entire version of you from it. And if you don't step in and own your story, they'll tell it for you. They'll paint it in colors that don't belong to you. They'll speak with confidence about things they never lived through, and you'll find yourself boxed into a life that doesn't reflect your truth. That's why smart people learn early. Control the narrative before someone else distorts it beyond recognition. But controlling the narrative isn't about defending yourself to everyone who doubts you. It's not about chasing approval or winning popularity. It's about being clear about who you are, what you stand for, and what you absolutely will not tolerate. It's about deciding what your presence communicates before you even say a word. And it's about making sure your choices, your boundaries, and your direction speak for you long before rumors do. There's a confidence that comes with clarity. When you know your own story inside and out, when you've processed your past, owned your flaws, and sharpened your values, no one can shake that. They can try to twist the facts, but they can't touch your truth. Because you've already claimed it. You're not hiding. You're not shrinking. You're walking in full awareness of who you are. That alone disrupts every attempt to reduce you to less. You also learn that not every story needs to be shared with everyone. Control doesn't mean oversharing. It doesn't mean justifying every decision to strangers or enemies in disguise. It means choosing what to reveal, when, and to whom, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Because not everyone deserves front row seats to your growth. Some people just want access so they can rewrite your success into scandal. Let them wonder, let them guess. Let your actions tell a better story than their opinions ever could. There will be times people label you unfairly, too cold, too ambitious, too distant, too emotional. Let them. Those labels are projections, not truths. When someone can't control your direction, they'll try to control the perception. But here's where it changes. You don't have to react. You don't have to defend yourself to people who never had the depth to understand you in the first place. Control the narrative by choosing what you give energy to. If it doesn't align with your truth, don't feed it. And yes, there will be moments where silence is your narrative, where your refusal to engage becomes the clearest message of all. You don't always have to correct the lie. Sometimes the dignity in your distance speaks louder than 100 explanations. When you stay grounded, steady, and clear on who you are, the noise around you starts to fade because clarity cuts through chaos. Every time, smart people don't just react to narratives, they create them. They're intentional with their image, their words, their presence. They don't wait to be misunderstood before they start showing who they are. They lead with truth. They take control before others take control of them. And when misrepresentation shows up, they don't panic, they pivot, they clarify, and then they move forward without begging for anyone's understanding. Your story is powerful, but only if you take ownership of it. Only if you decide that your voice will be the loudest one in the room when it comes to your identity, your purpose, your journey. Don't give away that power to people who weren't even there when you were fighting your battles. Don't let spectators become narrators, because in the end, the most dangerous thing you can ever be in someone else's hands is a story. Take it back, own the truth, and walk like someone who knows exactly what chapter they're in. You're not here to be defined. You're here to define yourself, and that's how you control the narrative.